So we'll move on to iron deficiency. So we said that iron deficiency was the second most preventable cause of developmental delay, because iron and B12 tend to happen in the same foods. And so if you're deficient in B12, functionally deficient, you're likely to be deficient in iron. And so why is this going to make a difference? So if we had a child who just had B12 deficiency, they would have a group of symptoms, which we've just explained. But if the child on top of that has iron deficiency, and 80% of the children that I have data for have iron deficiency as well as the B12.
Sorry, was that 80? 80.
Yeah. So it's a high amount. If they have that, what's the consequence of that? So just go through that. So it said second most preventable cause of developmental delay. But what's iron used for? I mean, we're not building iron structures or girders or whatever. So one of the main things we're using iron for is hemoglobin and a little protein in the muscles called myoglobin. And these are responsible for oxygen movement. So if your levels go down, then the amount of oxygen you can transport is reduced as well. And so this then is a problem, because as you get away from the lungs and you get into the fetus, say, for instance, the oxygen has to go on the mum's hemoglobin, then it has to cross the placenta and get swapped onto fetal hemoglobin. So if there's no oxygen, if the oxygen amount in the mum is low, then the oxygen amount in the fetus is low. So that's fine, that's oxygen, but what's the oxygen doing? Well, the oxygen is involved in the final step in the electron transport chain of making ATP. So the lower your oxygen, the less ATP, the less energy you make. But it's also involved in some other curious proteins. One of them is a conatase, which is in the Krebs cycle. Now, this marker you can see in organic acids tests, and that as the iron goes down, the citrate in the organic acids test goes up, because citrate is supposed to be used in the citric acid cycle. And so if you're getting citrate excreted, you're not using the citrate. So you're losing energy in that. The other curious protein is another protein called lysyl hydroxylase. Now that protein is responsible for the rigidity of collagen and for cross-linking collagen. So one of the things that does is stop you having very, very lax joints. And one of the things in the kids is often they have a hypermobility. Their joints are really lax and they'll tend to pop out, and they have symptoms like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, where they repeatedly have joint dislocations. So what does iron deficiency do? Well, you have a lower production of the heme iron, have a lower production of hemoglobin and myoglobin, therefore lower oxygen transfer and lower oxidative phosphorylation, i.e. lower energy. Then you have the lower activity of these iron sulfur proteins. So that then means that you're not getting as much energy into the electron transport chain anyway. And then in the electron transport chain, there are a number of iron proteins or heme-containing proteins in there, and there's less of that. And the important thing about this is that ferritin, which is the iron transport, one of the iron transport molecules in serum, the ferritin levels are inversely proportional to IQ in the kids. So the lower the ferritin, the lower the measurable IQ is. So for a mother or a parent starting out who wants to have their child have the best advantages in life, you really want to have this as high as possible. And so it's a really big disadvantage of a low iron diet. So iron loading occurs in utero. So mum eats the iron or the red meat or whatever. Mum's iron then is transferred to the fetus. The later that the mother can hold the fetus, the more iron that's transferred, because most iron transfer happens in the third trimester. So typically on preemie babies, the more preemie they are, the lower the iron is. And the lower the iron is in the mother, the lower the iron is in the fetus. And this is critical, because I know from questioning a lot of mothers that have children with developmental delay, one of the questions I ask them is, was your iron tested? Oh, yes, it was, and I was low. So we have here in the fetus, or the mother with the fetus, they're being told they should be careful, because their child is going to be iron deficient. It's not going to have enough iron. it's going to be compromised as far as the iron goes. So part of this talk is most of these deficiencies happen in the womb, and really with a lot more attention by the medicos, a lot of this could be prevented. So these are just the iron and sulfur proteins. You can look at them later. Here is an example of the mini mental score estimation. So you can see that in mild cognitive impairment, the activity of this enzyme, the one that has the iron in it, the iron sulfur, that's higher than when you get to Alzheimer's disease, and it drops off. So as ferritin drops, then these drop as well. So this is in adults with dementia, but considering we can't measure the mini mental score of the kids who can't tell us things and can't answer questionnaires, this is what's going on. And so I see some of these, and they'd be off the scale down here as far as the mini mental score, because the activity of this enzyme is terrible. I have some where the activity might only be 10% of normal, so they would be way down here. So that's with very low ferritin. So I get ferritin levels down at 12. I had one today, it was 7. It was atrocious. So here is some representative scattergram data of children with autism or developmental delay. And you could see that as this number gets higher, this would be going lower. You can see the majority of them have very high conatase levels. So this is what the representative is in the population. If this is normal, if this is 100% efficiency, then as you go up, 50%, 25%, etc. So these guys are losing buckets of energy in this one little step, citric acid cycle. So they're trying to get it in here, and it doesn't go, and it's excreted as citrate in urine because this is a urinary acid. So you get a drop in many mineral score acid. So this is why iron is critically important for your baby. You want this baby to be fiery. You want all this energy to go in and be processed in this cycle. So it's very important that people realize the consequences, in my opinion. So iron deficiency starts when ferritin is below 70. And in the Scandinavian continents, they are recommending that a woman supplement if her ferritin is below 70. The average woman in the United States with childbearing age has a ferritin level of 45. Not very promising.
No.
You haven't seen anything yet because it's just going to get worse. And so these are the consequences: poor oxygen transport, poor energy conversion, lower IQ. And one of the things they get is they get restless leg syndrome. So one of the things with the kids is a lot of them have twitching and uncontrolled movements, which is correlated with iron. And the low iron gives you EDS type symptoms, this floppy joints and hypermobility. So it's very important. So to me, that helps to add to your complexity of what you're dealing with a child with developmental delay. Some of them have got pure B12 deficiency, which can be resolved very quickly. They have a smaller list of symptoms. But potentially, if somebody was to look at this list and then say, go and then start ticking it off against what they're seeing in front of them, they could say, well, it's likely the child's also got iron deficiency, because then you know what you're going to have a look for.